Hey everybody, going live here. How's everybody doing? Um, just wanted to do a little bit of a check-in stream with everybody, of course. If you can, hit with super chats, try to get to your questions. Go to patreon.com/TMBS. Have a really important episode coming out tomorrow with Joanne Wiest on essentialism and why we need to uproot that if we really want any hope of it having any like actually liberatory project. So guys, the book is available. If you go to John Hunt Publishing or you check out my Twitter feed, the book is available for pre-order on paperback and Kindle. So for those of you who are interested in Against the Web, the cosmopolitan answer to the new right, the cosmopolitan socialist answer to the new right, you can definitely check that out and snag yourself a copy. So just wanted to hit a few things. Shouts to Kali, as always. I mean, it's a very intense time, obviously. And I think that thank you so much. I think this feeling of panic and anxiety, which we all feel, in so many different ways. I mean, that is the feeling state of our economy. That's the feeling state of this phase of neoliberalism, this phase of capitalism. And I think, this sense of constantly being precarious, always having to hustle, always being on the move, being in a state of overwork and fatigue constantly. And now it's like fused with this enormous public health crisis, which, particularly in the United States, obviously just reveals the reality of what we've been doing for the last time for therapy with Michael Brooks. I don't know about all that, please. But, the collapse of global public health networks go back to the 1980s, right? These real hacks into the long-term Republican and corporate project in the United States, and of course also the project of corporate Democrats to, how you doing, man? To undermine public infrastructure, to destroy public health infrastructure in the United States. And then as an extension of that, undermine efforts at any type of kind of broad-based solidarity, so that the attack on the social infrastructure is synchronized with the attack on the cultural idea of solidarity, the practice and the idea that we're all in this together. And, we're at this incredible point where, I mean, on some level, if you're just scripting this, you have, you know, a serious public health crisis, which has everything in it. It has xenophobia and fear about China. It has the linkage of globalization without any local resiliency. That even implicates some of the horrific ecological costs of animal agriculture, right? And this idea that we have this big interdependent system without any resiliency, which I'll get to in a minute. And then we have, our just, I mean, I don't know, buffoon, clown, asshole, jackass, sociopath president, and a Republican Party, which at this point, I mean, is just a death cult. They won't even support, paid sick leave. Just this relentless, ruthless eliminationist logic. The Trump administration still pushing forward to try to cut food stamps during this time of crisis. Piddling efforts to deal with the fallout of this, and all sorts of exemptions for all of the kind of big business predators that already control our system and damage so many people's lives, right? And then in the Democratic Party, after decades of failure, decades of this third way corporate project, which basically says we'll also be the party of extreme inequality, unregulated business, and nothing serious in terms of dealing with structural issues, but will be somewhat socially progressive at times. in the 80s and 90s, folks like Joe Biden and the Clintons were actually quite socially reactionary and extremely racist in criminal justice policies and quite ready to demonize gay and lesbian folks. But now the kind of cultural politics have shifted, but not the relationship to business and industry. And they're propping up Joe Biden. Honestly, watching Joe Biden and the Democratic Party prop him up and the corporate media prop him up, it reminds me of, thank you. It reminds me of the 1980s Politburo when they would appoint these guys. There was a succession of leaders pointed head of the Soviet Union before Gorbachev eventually came to power, who died like almost immediately. I mean, just people whose absolute failing health. Please talk about the hourly service industry in NYC help. I mean, honestly, that's not, I know that just broadly speaking, that people who work in service and people who are in jobs like driving Ubers and other, every facet of the service industry are at great risk. And again, that's another manifestation of how we do this primary, of how we do our economy. I mean, that's the thing is like at a certain point, it's just becoming the same message again and again and again. We have a dead neoliberalism that is incapable of resolving the contradictions of our time. We have the emergent and governing far right in various ways and with various symptoms across the globe. Donald Trump is going full MAGA on Corona, reifying the authoritarian tendencies, reifying the extreme xenophobia. Shout out to folks in LA taking vacant homes. This is a time to really consider a lot of things. I mean, we should be demanding that local governments, that Mayor de Blasio, thank you so much, Leslie, that he take empty apartments and put homeless people in them. We should be demanding that across the country. We should demand an end to evictions. We should demand an end to foreclosure processes. And absolutely, people across the board should be considering things like rent strikes and other areas of reclaiming some power. Yeah, Andropov and Chernikov dying. I don't know why. Yeah, I was talking about the Soviet premiers dying in succession. And that reminds me of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. And then we have Bernie Sanders with like this little outpost of decency and sanity and basic humanity that the corporate establishment, all sorts of, mediocre pop culture woke splainers, the Democratic Party, and all sorts of other people have just been, thank you, Bridget, waging war on relentlessly for the past several years. And, again, I've got some critiques of the Sanders campaign. So why are we bailing out Cruz Enterprises? I mean, I think we all know why, right? We know because this administration and most Democrats will do for industry. They won't do for people. There isn't a people's bailout package. There isn't no foreclosures, no evictions. And as a matter of fact, let's have a national housing plan. Of course, let's give everybody universal health care. These are the things we need to do. We aren't even in a point, obviously, where the Congress is actually considering like direct cash transfers right now, which, Tulsi Gabbard, to her credit, put forward. But we know, I mean, we've got Bernie Sanders. He's got the answers. He's got the integrity. He's got the campaign. But no, all of these people have been committed to destroying it. The United States really resembles 1980s USSR in a lot of ways. Stagnation, decline, cultural collapse, and an increasing amount of rage against the system. I think this is what the Ruskies felt. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think there's definitely a lot of analogies between where the United States is now and where the Soviets were in the 80s. And I think the other thing that we'll see coming out of this, and again, let's be very real. Look, this is never going to be a source that idealizes and romanticizes the Chinese system. There is obviously a serious authoritarianism to it, a serious capitalism to it. Do you think people in the States are too uniquely stupid and crazy to slow the spread? Do you think they will violate mandates and get other people sick? Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what's going on. It was a little funky with the internet there. No, look, again, The core problem here, and obviously people should be following their, sorry about that, I think it was the internet problem here. People should be following the advice of doctors and public health officials. You should absolutely be not going to large gatherings. You shouldn't be going to bars. You shouldn't be going out. You should be washing your hands. You should be taking a lot of precautions. There's no doubt about it. That's obviously the responsible thing to do. But the bigger context of the problem here is that we have a complete collapse of public infrastructure in the United States, and that's a design of policy. That is a design of fundamental Republican policy. There's not a single Republican that has not tried to gut the public health and basic infrastructure of the United States, and of course, many Democrats. I mean, I think, looking at Joy Reid be sort of shocked on Twitter. I can't believe we're a rich country. What's going on with our public health system? It's like, well, there is a presidential candidate that you've been lying about and demonizing about and having on, body experts or all this other fucking nonsense to talk about, who's been explaining it for a while. And you guys have been waging a war on him while ineffectively fighting Donald Trump with all sorts of conspiracy theories and nonsense. So I think that no talk about the 1 trillion market stimulus package the FDA dumped that helped for like what, 30 minutes. Oh yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, we all know universal housing, universal health care. We all know these things. We know these things. We know the answers. I also think we need to start thinking of the Larry Kudlow impression. I love Larry Kudlow's like, well, for God's sake, don't go traveling to Seattle, Emerald City. Drinky, drinky, drinky. What you gotta do is you pour yourself a bath of vodka and you swim in it. And it can't be beer, it's gotta be vodka. You gotta be drinking something real because that's the only way you spread the virus. If you don't spread the virus, it can't be beer. It's gotta be a real drink. Um, I think that this is a time where, again, paradoxically, do you think Democrats will prop up Biden, demonize anyone mentioning his mental decline? Yeah, of course, we already know that, but we have to, speak clearly about it. How successful do you think Sanders would be in a third-party campaign? Is there leverage from running third-party? I don't see them doing that or having the infrastructure for that. Uh, Chris Matthews, like, I've always wanted to know more about Tulsi Gabbard. What makes her tick? What makes Tulsi tick? What is she doing in Congress? What is she doing as a candidate? What was that, Mohammed? If I missed your super chat, tell me again, because I missed a couple. But, really, I try to get to the super chats, but really, bottom line, it's just incredibly, it helps a lot. But regardless, but Mohammed, tell me your super chat in case I missed it. Sometimes the super chat. Okay. Oh, I see. I live in Arizona. Primary is Tuesday, and they cut some polling places. The local government here is absolute trash. Okay, that sounds about right. Keep up the good work, Michael. Thank you so much. I'm honored. So we have to play with a paradox now because we should be isolated. Do you think the recent strikes against the Iranian forces in Iraq will escalate or that the U.S. will try to invade during this crisis? I don't think they'll try to invade. I think they'll keep up doing what they're doing. And I think that we should be demanding and following Ilhan Omar's excellent work and calling for an end to all sanctions. The amount of deaths that are happening in Iran are going to get to a point where they're almost genocidal. This U.S. policy is absolutely obscene. Those sanctions should be lifted. And other types of sanctions, like this ridiculous blockade on Cuba, is actually blocking incredibly important public health outcomes that could come from active and serious collaboration with Cuba. These sanctions are a global threat to public health. A nurse manager told me to take care of a COVID plus COVID patient a few days ago and came to work tomorrow, biggest hospital in a 10-case state. Okay. I think that, guys, the paradox is that right now we need to obviously be socially isolating as much as possible and not having a lot of in-person contact. That's obviously the right thing to do. Conversely, what do I think Bernie should hammer that he's the only one with the answer to the crisis. And actually, for what it's worth, it's all been a whole ridiculous spin around that he's the one with an actual moderate, robust agenda that can get us back to something resembling normal. Is it possible the coronavirus ends up helping Trump? The country might recover by November 4th, and God knows he'd be better spin doctor and messenger than Biden. The market recovers. Trump says, I beat the pandemic. I mean, of course, yeah, that's totally possible. It's also possible that what's happening right now is an absolute political body blow to Trump. And it's another missed opportunity because he will lose. And we're pushing forward a guy who can barely function with a decades long horrific record, propped by the least imaginative, sort of hacks of the Democratic and media establishment and corporate bagmen. The paradox of staying socially isolated, but also starting to really think about how we can build community, how we can get to know our neighbors. Um, what do I think of Dave Rubin's claim that the left's response to the coronavirus is more dangerous than the virus itself? I don't know. I just really think I actually have a new toothpaste that would really be good. How should Sanders address Cuba and Castro in the debate? I know he's right in the substance, but the media will spin it against him in Florida. He should stay the fuck away from that in the debate. Absolutely. Um, if Bernie brings up how Biden lied about his civil rights record 40 years ago, he'd lose all of his black support and be done tomorrow. I don't know about all that. I don't, again, I think people think there are these kind of simple, nifty tricks that aren't necessarily there. But I would like to see him bring some of it up. Although the problem with Biden is that Biden's support is not coming because people think he's honest, and it's not coming because people like his record. It's becoming because of a misplaced sense of safety. And I don't know how you undermine that. During tomorrow's debate, Sanders needs to bait Biden into repeating that he voted for the Iraq War, knowing there weren't WMDs. I don't think people really care about that. They should, but they don't. The question is, could you somehow connect that with him being irresponsible and risky against Trump? I mean, if the U.S. can't reform, the system will break down. Systems that don't reform impersonate. Request Warren drinking in NYC, downplaying COVID. Okay. It's like, here's the thing. I don't know anybody anything. And so I'm just going to go with my girlfriends. We're just going to have a little bit of a drink session. We're just going to take care of ourselves. And, I don't want to hear about a lot of, white man at the CDC telling me that I can't socialize. Respect from Australia. Hopefully one day you can make it down here. I'd love that. Independent ticket, easy for Bernie in case Bernie falls apart. Biden falls apart more. There needs to be a backup ticket on the ballot. Any predictions re-upcoming primaries? I know. I'm really not sure. I mean, I think obviously Florida's bad. MB, what Bernie plan personally helps you most? Sheriff comfortable? Mine is student debt. Well, student debt relief would help me a lot. And in the grand scheme of things, certainly single payer for everybody. Today, de Blasio said that DC prints money. Hello. Thank God for TYT. Hey, we met and presented at JPCon in Idaho. I've been studying the Prince and Machiavelli and us stream of you, your Machiavelli plus empathy strategy. Sorry. Oh, yeah, I will actually do. I'm trying to think of how to kind of. The specific content on Machiavelli will more be Sunday shows for patrons. That's when we do deep history and theory dives. And sometimes in the post game, we actually just did a really great piece on Gramsci, Cornell West in the last post game, and I think that will be clipped and released tomorrow. So we need to figure out, though, self-isolate now, but start to think about how you can build community later. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know people in your life. And certainly this time, be in touch with people. I mean, I'm certainly in touch with members of my family and so on. Some of it's scary. We're kind of in different parts of the country. There's more you wish you could control. There's definitely, times folks that need a lot of help. As I always say, these real issues are not far from me, and certainly not far from how I grew up. So, that's another kind of dynamic that takes place as well. So I think we actually need to use this moment though to reflect as a, take in the isolation, make sure we're playing our part, whatever small part we can play in trying to bend this curve, but then trying to really think about how can we get to know each other as neighbors? How can we connect in our neighborhoods? And then from that, what are the kind of practical steps that we need to build, both as political projects, but also local resiliency projects are going to be something else that folks are going to need to think about much more. Agriculture, community support networks, and things like that. I'd like Bernie to say I think Joe will win the general election, but I don't think he will. I'd like Bernie to say Joe. I think Joe can. I don't understand that. I'm sorry. I'm confused. What are your thoughts on the significant discrepancies between vote totals and exit polls? Camp is hammering this home daily. Your thoughts? I need to look into it. I think they look sketchy. Um, I'm frankly, though, I mean, I'm most concerned what Bernie finally mentioned today are the voting lines in places like, in areas that would favor him. And that is absolutely a form of voter suppression. I'm Trump 2020, but I love discourse. Okay. Keep watching. We'll persuade you not to be. How is it that the very demographic that's most vulnerable to COVID-19 vote against the guy who's quintessentially designed to handle it and for a guy who's trying to undermine it? Well, again, guys, I mean, most voting just isn't rational. I mean, this is the kind of, and also, we are going up against a decades long, I mean, that's what Richard Wolff really emphasizes, right? The decades long hegemonic and propaganda project against social democracy, against any actual critique of capitalism. And I think one of the things that we need to rethink and really strategize about is like, what is the what do we really need to get forward so people have that sense of much more solidarity, much more power over their own lives, willingness to protest, willingness to resist, willingness to take action for themselves, their families, and their communities and friends. And then also, where are we fighting losing battles about rhetoric that we can frankly let go of to be more effective? Bernie really needs to highlight how he has completely curb stomped Biden with independent voters throughout the primary tomorrow. Yes, I think that's extremely important. I think Bernie really needs to talk about the vote totals with Hispanic voters, the vote totals with independent voters, and actually say, look, I am increasing youth turnout. And ultimately, both for this emergency of defeating Trump and any long-term prospects for the Democratic Party, you have to look at my coalition. Will the election be delayed? Upside for Bernie. I think any delay, I'm not sure. I can't read it. I just think the corporate media, like cable news is insulating Biden so much. It's kind of incredible. Do you buy that the AOC rift was Bernie was because of Rogan? I really don't know. I mean, if it was, that's incredibly disturbing and super bad news about AOC. I think actually in general, independent, but I don't know. I think in general, thinking about what we're dealing with now and the fact that like serious airtime was taken up with mean tweets and Rogan and all this just unbelievable fucking stupidity and nonsense. I'm really hoping that these crises can try to start to kind of focus us and get folks' heads in the game because things are getting pretty for real, and they have been. Can you do a Warrenite NOI Obama? Here's the thing. I don't know anybody anything. They called me about the auto bailout, but I was like, excuse me, I'm not really ready to take in that information. I'm doing a month of self-care. Auto bailout? How about a self-care session? Let's see. I think AOC versus Bernie nonsense was created by the National Review. Yeah, I don't know the origins of that. Please don't turn into Hassan and let the money distract you. I'm worried about your response to AOC thing. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, that's a pretty dumb comment. I'll just say this. I think that we have, unfortunately, a stan culture and a cancel culture in the left, and both of those things are incredibly unhealthy, right? Incredibly unhealthy. We need to always be thinking about how we can bring people in where they can be brought in and how to be appealing to a broad segment of people, right? So AOC has a huge amount of political talent. It's great that she's in Congress. And, I mean, she's one of a handful of people, frankly, that I've ever given a campaign contribution to. It wasn't a huge one, but I did. So that's on one end. On the flip side, we have this stan culture, which, again, the most disastrous. I mean, look at how many people, there's people today that can still not be real about Elizabeth Warren. So if I see things that I think are not good from AOC, I'm going to articulate them in the hope that they get better. And I think, frankly, Bernie Sanders surrogates in general needed to be way more on the ball. They needed to be much more disciplined as a campaign. They needed to have talking points for their surrogates. And I think, obviously, no surrogate should be saying positive things about a primary opponent. Thank you, Aisha. Before a major vote. That's again, I'm noticing with AOC that some folks, again, to get into she's terrible and all this is very foolish. She's incredibly talented. It's good she's there. There's a huge opportunity. And then conversely, I see a bunch of other people who are just like, no, 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 no. We don't want any division. AOC, and it's again, it's those both of those positions are totally foolish, and we need to be able to have, conversations that are real. I will say honestly, Bernie Sanders is super unique. There is nobody else in modern politics in this country who has the consistent level of care for day in and day out working folks as him. And there's some other people, and again, a lot of this is, they're coming up. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see what emerges. I like Rashida a lot. I like Ilan a lot. I like AOC, right? We'll see. But I think that folks need to, again, totally reject and get away from stan or cancel. They're both polarized. They both lead to very foolish, zero-sum thinking, black and white thinking, which just isn't intelligent in either regard. So, and I notice it from both kind of sectors with AOC. It's very intense now. If you praise her when she does something great, certain folks will say, no, she's blah, blah, blah. And then on the flip side, if you say, hey, why would AOC be, praising Elizabeth Warren while she's attacking Bernie? That's not a good look for a surrogate. It freaks other people out. So, let's reject both foolish approaches. I don't really, I don't know. I did read that article. I found the article concerning, but we'll see. I watch you specifically, and I didn't know that you do great impressions. Thanks for the laugh. Oh, well, thank you so much. But we're going to be doing a lot more content on, yeah, right. How dare people be complex? We are going to, Biden picking Warren for VP would be a disastrously stupid decision. So yeah, but a lot of that content we'll be working on in terms of that, like, what kind of left are we building? How are we thinking about this stuff? How are we improving? Improving across the board. So, folks, I'll probably do another one of these tomorrow. I'll keep everybody. I think we're planning on doing a Tuesday TMBS with no guests in studio, but with the three of us. We might not. If we don't, we'll have an alternative. For patrons, tomorrow, the conversation and deep dive on essentialism versus liberation and bioethics is indispensable. And my intention is to have Adolph Reed Jr. on once a month. We got to get really clear here and really, really clean up if we have a hope of getting into fighting shape. And the globe needs a left in fighting shape, and we need each other, and we need to work on each other and work on ourselves and support each other and give each other room for growth. This could be a moment where we deep in for a totally different level of intellectual awareness, of empathy, of compassion, of sophistication, um, that allows us to grow and evolve, um, and meet the pressing conditions we have today. And it's definitely my intention to do, what I can and what we can to help in that process. And each and every one of you who are doing super chats and are members, it's indispensable. I'm honored by it. We're going to work harder than ever. Stay safe, but start to find ways to get even more connected. And we will keep going forward. Much love to all of you. Stay safe, be strong, peace, and love.